Good morning, everyone. As the Minister responsible for the delivery of childcare, I'm pleased to update you on our continued progress towards high-quality, affordable, accessible, and inclusive childcare. We know that childcare enables parents to work, to pursue an education, and to participate in Alberta's growing economy. When our government signed the historic childcare agreement with the federal government in the fall of 2021, we started work on an ambitious space creation and parent fee reduction goal. Alberta's government has always had the same goal, to make childcare the best it can be in Alberta for families, more affordable, with more choice. So far, we've made tremendous progress towards $10 a day, creating 31,000 new spaces across the province and lowering parent fees to an average of $15 a day. Yet many families are still paying more than others, even in the same region, for the same age child, despite the government now covering the supermajority of the cost of the service. And reimbursement to providers is not equitable and frankly more complicated than it needs to be. We know there is always more we can do to make affordable childcare even more accessible for Alberta families. That's why starting on April 1, Alberta will introduce a flat monthly fee for parents using full-time and part-time licensed childcare in daycares and family day homes. Parents with children in full-time childcare will only pay $326.25 per month, which is equivalent to $15 per day. And parents with children in part-time care will pay $230 a month. With the implementation of these changes, approximately 80% of childcare fees will be reimbursed to providers on behalf of parents by government, primarily through the Canada-Alberta agreements. This represents an estimated tax-free savings of approximately $11,000 per enrolled child per year. The implementation of these changes will also reduce funding inconsistencies between providers in the same region that are meeting the same standards and caring for the same age children. Parents and providers alike will benefit from more consistent and transparent regionalized fees. In contrast to a flat monthly parent fee, preschools will be able to set their own fees and be reimbursed up to $100 per child per month on a family's behalf, which is an increase from the current $75 per month. With Alberta's government now covering 80% of childcare fees, the current childcare subsidy will be phased out and rolled into the provision of $15 a day flat for children kindergarten age and under. Alberta's government is proud to continue to invest in families, children, and childcare providers and educators. As we put this new system into place and continue to build a childcare system that is primarily funded by government, we know it is important to give childcare providers as much flexibility and support as possible. We want to ensure our childcare providers can continue to deliver the high-quality services that families need. When the flat monthly fee comes into effect for parents on April 1st, providers will have the flexibility to offer optional services for supplemental fees that are over and above the provision of core high-quality childcare. Since many families value extra services today, like meals, field trips, and transportation, we want to ensure they continue to be available once the flat monthly fee is brought in. Families will always be able to choose whether they pay for optional services, and no child will receive preferential access to core childcare if their family does or does not choose optional services. To support the childcare sector and these changes, I'm pleased to share that the vast majority of daycare providers, roughly 85%, will see an increase in funding starting on April 1st. We know the cost of delivering high-quality care is rising, and we're committed to ensuring the childcare system stays strong and accessible for everyone. We're tackling red tape and costs by streamlining the claims process and using new technology solutions to reduce paperwork so providers can focus more time on caring for kids. We also know that it's not enough to just provide more savings. We also need to provide more spaces to meet our ambitious targets. As mentioned, since signing the agreement, Alberta has welcomed 31,000 new licensed childcare spaces. However, Alberta's government has committed to creating up to 68,700, with at least 42,500 of these being not-for-profit. Alongside our partners in the federal government, we have more work to do. And so today I am proud to announce the Building Blocks Capital Grant Program to create thousands more spaces for Alberta families. This new $53 million program will expand Alberta's public and nonprofit daycare spaces and expand childcare across Alberta by thousands. The program offers two streams for major and minor capital projects like renovations, retrofitting, even the construction of entirely new spaces. And this program is now open for applications right now. Details regarding eligibility are available on alberta.ca. Building blocks is one more way Alberta's government is helping our growing childcare sector reach its full potential. We're building for the future of childcare, creating more access for families who need it in the years to come. As Alberta looks beyond March 2026 and prepares to negotiate the next term of the childcare agreement, we look forward to building a more sustainable, flexible system that meets our province's unique needs. My provincial and territorial colleagues and I are united in our commitment to secure long-term predictable funding for the Canada-wide childcare system that we're all building together. The steps we're taking today will lay the foundation for a thriving, sustainable childcare system that supports both providers and parents while setting our kids up for success. Thank you, and I look forward to taking your questions.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of our formal remarks. Now we'll move to media questions and answers. Just a reminder, Minister's on a tight schedule today, and we have time for one question and one follow-up. Please, I ask that you identify yourself and your media outlet before asking your question. So we'll start in the room, and then we'll go to the reporters on the line. Yes.
Hi, yeah, Siobhan Spolsky with CTV News in Edmonton. I'm just wondering, and I'm not sure how much you can speak to this, but obviously there's a lot of speculation as to what might happen in Ottawa in the next couple of months in terms of the next federal government. Have you had any signal from Ottawa in terms of whether or not a Conservative government would continue to fund this program? Have you had that guarantee?
I have not had discussions on the plans of a future federal Conservative government. I have been reaching out to the current government to try to discuss our childcare system, and unfortunately have not been able to meet with them. But it is certainly Alberta's intention to structure something that will work for providers and parents over the long term with either, with whoever is in the federal government. And I do think that it is a little unfortunate that we're not able to provide providers or parents long-term predictability because there is so much uncertainty over the future of this agreement. But rest assured, the Alberta government, as it is stepping in today, providing increases for 85% of childcare providers, Alberta's government will make sure that providers and parents are taken care of regardless of where this agreement goes in the future.
And just as a follow-up, in terms of workforce, I know you mentioned the thousands of new spaces that you're still hoping to fill, but I know they're having questions just about having trained workers. Do you happen to know how many workers are needed to be able to fill and occupy those spaces, and is there any sort of programs that would help daycares find and fill those?
We have a number of programs that are increasing the generation of new early childhood educators. For example, we have some very generous professional development supports to help upgrade ECE level 1s to level 2s and level 3s. We've opened up our ECE level 1 course to everyone, and it's free. And we're also partnering with post-secondaries to create more spaces in their institutions for early childhood educators. This is is obviously a concern. You need educators to accommodate new spaces. Alberta's doing very well. We've increased our ECE count by about 10,000, I believe, since the signing of the agreement, and we continue to make substantial progress in that area.
Absolutely. Yes.
Lisa Johnson, the Canadian Press. Can you just clarify here, you're talking about the Alberta's government is covering 80% of childcare fees. We've talked about a building blocks capital grant. An Albertan watching this might assume that this money is coming from the Alberta government. Can you clarify what dollars are actually coming from the Alberta government and what are coming from the federal government here?
Yeah, so the Alberta government is a partner with the federal government in the Canada-Alberta Early Learning and Childcare Agreement, and that the federal contribution over the 5-year period was $3.8 billion. The provincial contribution is tripling this year from $250 million per year for this agreement to close to $750 million this year. So those are the numbers. The federal government is the majority funder of this program, including the capital grants, and that's because this is a federal program. And that is something to always keep in mind. We are providing inflationary support out of provincial dollars for a program that is very much a federal program. So to be clear, the federal government is the majority funder, and frankly, that means that they should be covering the majority of inflationary increases.
Just to follow up, this is not an average, but a subsidy to try to get all those regional disparities closer to that average, the way I understand it. Will this apply, or are you aiming for the same kind of system when we get closer to the average of $10 a day? Because the point of that program was to be an average of 10, or under the federal program was an average of $10 a day. So as we get closer to that milestone, is this kind of the same subsidy program you want to put in to reach $10 a day, not as an average, but as a cap?
So what we're bringing in on April 1st is very much a flat $15 per day, regardless of where you live in Alberta. Averages have significant challenges. For example, in Calgary, we have providers that are charging radically different fees for children the same age. And that is confusing for parents. And providers have also expressed concerns about equitable funding. Remember that the government is now covering 80% of the cost of the system. So it is difficult to justify radically different childcare fees or provider reimbursement within the same region. The flat fee very much simplifies the system and makes it more equitable and transparent. And we're also basing the fees on regions. So we've split Alberta into 13 different regions for daycares and 7 different regions for family day homes that have common fee characteristics. In other words, their cost drivers are similar, and there will be minimum and maximum fee ranges for each of those areas that all providers will now fall into. And new entrants will come in at the midpoint of those ranges as opposed to coming in at some random point as they did previously, out of fairness to the existing operators.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Okay, Catherine Burkowski, Alberta State. Yeah, I'm trying to understand that, because even in the same city, you can have really different input costs. Like you could have a really expensive rent in a high demand area. You can have higher heating costs. So can you explain how much you're subsidizing in that sort of structure? Because that's the part I'm not getting.
No, it's a great question, and it was a complicated endeavor to solve, and that's why we didn't go with a particular rate, because for a region we have a fee range, because we have to accommodate the fact that businesses existed before the agreement was signed. So what we did is we created, using statistical analysis and a cost survey that we sent out to the entire childcare sector, which the vast majority did complete. We determined statistical ranges that would support the viability of at least 85% of providers, and the providers above that were super high fee, in some cases 3 times the fees of other childcare providers for the same age child in the same region, meeting the same standards. So the funding framework is very much set to support the viability and sustainability of the vast majority of childcare providers, and more closely mirror the actual cost of delivering childcare in that region. So, the fees in the north would obviously be higher because it's generally more expensive, whereas more dense populations might see more moderate fees, like in Red Deer.
Okay, and I'm wondering about these allowable additional fees. Is there any cap on that? Can you charge like, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of dollars extra for food, for example? Like, I'm wondering about these additional fees. Are there any parameters to make sure that that's affordable?
Yes, there are. So first, you can't charge for core childcare. They have to be optional services that are supplemental to the provision of core childcare, and you can't preference parents or children based on whether they're willing to pay supplemental fees or not. These optional services will be reported to my department biannually, and we will, of course, step in if they're not appropriate. Ultimately, parents and providers will decide what is reasonable for a service. So a provider can't ask a parent to pay what you described as hundreds of dollars for meals, because of course they won't pay that, and they don't have to. These are optional services. They cannot be mandatory. They are disclosed to my department, and we will investigate any complaints. So if a child care provider were to try to charge additional fees for what is the provision of core childcare, that would not be allowable. They would have 15 days to remedy that, or they would risk funding reductions or agreement termination.
Okay, any other questions in the room? Yep.
Just back to this kind of uncertainty at the federal level, what is your contingency plan if a government of whatever stripe decides they're not going to fund this anymore after you've already put all this investment into the system?
Well, that is a great question, and the reality is that if the federal funding did not continue, the childcare systems in every province and territory would not be viable. In other words, the businesses, without receiving what is now the 80% of funding in Alberta, and I'm sure the majority funding in every other province and territory, they would not be sustainable. So the provincial and territorial governments would probably have to step in, at least for a period of time, to transition them back to a market-based system. It's my hope that we don't have to go that way. It's my hope that the federal government, whether this one or the next, will provide predictable and cost inflation indexed funding for provinces and territories so that we have that long-term stability and predictability, and we can build the system without worrying about exactly that scenario where what happens if the majority funder of the system is no longer the majority funder of the system. As you know, we've got significant competing priorities in healthcare and education, housing. This is a very big program, over $1 billion in Alberta, and it would be very difficult for any province or territory to fund their program absent the federal partner.
And have you had a conversation about how much you would be willing to subsidize the program if the province had to go it alone?
Again, we are looking at different scenarios based on different governments and different funding levels. But again, the federal government currently is the supermajority of the funder of our system, and governments together, Alberta and the federal government, fund 80% of the system. So it would be very difficult for any province, including Alberta, to provide a comparable childcare system and subsidy arrangement absent the federal partner. Yeah, it would be very difficult.
Okay, and one question in the back?
Hi, Leo, City News Edmonton. In terms of the grant, you said that 85% of childcare provider, that includes daycare. Those grant, does that include day homes as well? And if so, what type of eligibility for day homes? Because they can't really renovate a home for the day home.
The Building Blocks program is not, family day homes would not be eligible for the Building Blocks program, but they would also have very different scales of retrofitting or development necessary to care for children versus a standalone, not-for-profit facility. So we are also moving the family day homes to flat fees of $326.25 per month per child. And these supports, again, are intended to support the vast majority of family day homes in being financially viable and sustainable. So I'm confident that there is a great rationale to be a family day home childcare provider. We also just provided additional funding to the family day home agencies that support family day home operators, including incentives to onboard new family day home operators. And the way that we structured the funding, family day home educators should see higher take-home pay than under the previous family day home agency contracts.
And it's coincidentally it's April 1st too. Does that also address how, with the increase of another carbon tax, is that how you address affordability as well for the family?
That was not a consideration in the rollout of this, in the timing of the implementation of these changes. Really, we're trying to move as quickly as possible while ensuring that we can execute appropriately. So that was the date that kind of the technology and the processes and the agreements lined up. I would have liked to have done it on January 1st, to be frank, but April 1st is when the flat fee will be rolled out. Thank you.
With no other questions in the room, let's move to the phones. Operator, can you please put through our first caller?
The first question is from Paula Duacek from CBC. Please go ahead.
Hi there. I am with the CBC Business Unit in Calgary. The commercial real estate firm CBRE has recently put out a report saying that there's been a huge amount of interest from new businesses trying to open up childcare centers. The problem is that there's just not enough appropriate real estate available in this city. I wondered if you had any comment on that dimension of this issue.
Yeah, well, first, through the Building Blocks program, not-for-profit and public childcare space creation will now have a grant that can help offset the costs of identifying those spaces. On the for-profit side, we did have a grant, but it has been oversubscribed, and closed while we go through those applications. Space is a challenge in many communities, and that's why we pushed for with the federal government for an additional allotment of family day homes, because frankly, in some areas, it's difficult to identify a space, and a family day home provider can provide that childcare that parents need very quickly without needing that to identify necessarily a commercial space. So it's a challenge, and we're happy to work with providers to help them identify where there may be a space they can utilize.
And a follow-up?
Is there any chance that that oversubscribed program might open again?
Yeah, we're looking at everything. We do have ambitious space creation targets, so we're rolling out today the Building Blocks program, and we're continuing to see significant interest in creating new childcare spaces. And I think, frankly, there's going to be even more interest. We are just providing 85% of the market increases. We have a growing population. In other words, there is demand. There is increased government support. So I think with or without government grants and incentives, there is a business case to launch new childcare, whether it be private or not-for-profit.
All right, operator, can you please put through our next caller?
Your next question is from Andrea Montgomery from 660 News Radio. Please go ahead.
Hi, good morning. I'm just looking for some clarification between core services and what supplemental fees would cover. Is food considered a core service? A lot of childcare providers do consider that a core service. We've seen in the past years them using outside catering because they haven't been able to adjust their fees to match the cost of inflation with their grocery charges. So could you just clarify what that might look like for?
Yeah, it's a good question. First, we're providing flexible envelope funding so that providers can continue to provide the services that they do today under the new framework. While snacks will be considered core, more substantial meals and meals matching the dietary choices of the parents, that would likely be an optional supplemental service for some childcare providers. That being said, a childcare provider can provide these supplemental services at no charge. They have the flexibility to do that. That's a decision that they can make. And this new funding framework very much is intended to sustain businesses that have existed for the last few years the way they are. They're getting an increase on the funding they've received for the last few years. So they can continue, they should be able to continue to do what they're doing, which if that included meals more substantial than snacks, I'm sure that they will look at doing that. Again, it's optional, can't be mandatory, can't discriminate against parents or children that don't utilize the optional services.
And the follow-up?
Just to follow up, we've heard two main things from providers in the past 3 years, particularly smaller mom and pop type operations. One is that because of their agreement, they haven't been able to increase their fees to match the cost of inflation, which is putting them behind. And the second thing is that they've been receiving the grant and subsidy a full month late from the government, which has put them constantly in the hole. Have you made any adjustments to be able to help fill in those gaps so that they can raise their fees to match what it's actually costing to provide the service, and that they're getting reimbursed by the government in time so they're not always a month back?
A few things. So the average childcare provider in Alberta has received between a 6% and 9% increase over the last 3 years to offset inflation. As you've heard me announce today, in April they will receive at least a 2% increase. The providers that you are talking about, which express concerns over their viability, are likely in the bottom 25 percentile or bottom quarter of fees for providers, and I'm pleased to report that those providers will be receiving a more substantial increase because they will be brought up to the minimum benchmark for their region. So in some cases, a childcare provider, if they have very low fees, will actually have a substantial increase, whereas 85% will have an increase of 2% or more. And we're committed to ensuring that over the long term that childcare providers receive the funding necessary to provide childcare. And again, I would advocate for the federal partner to factor in some form of inflationary mechanism in the next agreement.
All right, and there's one more caller on the line. Operator, please put them through.
Your next question is from Graham Thompson from the Star. Please go ahead.
Yes, Minister, you mentioned regional, differences. A major problem sometimes in rural areas. We have more daycare spaces, of course, in urban areas. But does this program you're looking at, or bringing in April 1st, any sort of special consideration for rural areas that have a harder time getting daycare spaces and providing services?
Yeah, great question, and that is why we went with a regional model. So on both the daycare side and the family day home side, there are regions all across Alberta. Some are for urban centres and some are for rural areas. And the fee levels and reimbursement are very much calibrated to support the viability of the vast majority of childcare providers in that region. And I'm confident that these regions have been correctly calibrated to accommodate the differential costs in rural settings versus, say, a major urban center.
Okay, and one follow-up?
Yeah, hello? Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I was just wondering, the money, you said it went from $250 million per year to $750 million from the province. Is that correct? Where's that money coming from? The government's talking about a deficit. There's a lot of money being spent. I guess this program must be considered to be a priority for the government to take it.
The actual number is 720, so it's about a tripling, 250 million to 720 million. And it's a priority to meet our commitments under the agreement and to provide parents with affordable, accessible, high-quality, inclusive childcare. With that being said, there are additional competing priorities that the government of Alberta is trying to fund, including healthcare, education. We've got cost of living concerns, housing we need to build. So it is a challenge for the Alberta government, and that's why I joined my provincial and territorial colleagues who are also experiencing similar challenges with their child care systems that are growing rapidly with inflationary pressures. We really need the federal government to increase financial support to the program. This year, Alberta is, again, nearly tripling support to backfill those inflationary pressures. I'm not sure every province and territory would be in the position to do that. So again, hoping the federal government in the next term will address these funding pressures.
All right, so that ends the callers on the queue. We're going back to the room now. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm thinking a couple of years back to when these negotiations were first going on to come up with this agreement, and there was a lot of pushback from this government about the details of the program. I'm wondering now, your tone sounds different. Like, it sounds like you value this program, and I'm wondering, well, is that correct? Like, how much do you value it and why?
I value this program because it facilitates people to work who need to work or to upgrade their education, and it provides high quality early learning and care for children. With that being said, it is a very expensive program to deliver. One child in this program can cost $18,000 per year, with the government paying 80% of that fee. That's a $15,000-ish dollar tax-free incentive. Personally, I believe that this program should be more means tested. We do not have the capability to do that under the agreement with federal government. I have specifically advocated for the ability to means test it because we are also dealing with a system that is full. The utilization is 96%. It takes time to roll out additional spaces. And I think that the people who need the spaces the most, say a single mother, low income, may be waiting on a wait list, while people with the means to perhaps pay the majority of the child care fee rather than 80% being subsidized could find alternative care. I hope that answers your question.
Put on your jobs hat.
Yes.
Just thinking about the whole tariff situation, Federal Minister of Labor, your counterpart, said that he met with you in Calgary a couple days ago, and that you talked about potential, like what should an aid package look like from the federal government should there in fact be punishing tariffs imposed on Canada by the US. Specifically, what do you want to see for Alberta in any kind of tariff response aid package?
We did not discuss specific details on aid packages, although the federal minister indicated that the federal government would respond to support a Canadian and Albertan economic interests should there be a situation like that. We more talked about what Canada should prioritize given this situation, and it's many of the things Alberta's been advocating for years. We need additional export capabilities, so we need more rail, pipelines, export terminals, and we need to diversify our customer base. And we can only do that if the provinces and territories and the federal government get on board with projects of the national interest. In other words, we need to be able to get our products east and west to countries like Japan, South Korea, Germany, so that we're not dependent on one customer. With that being said, it's my hope that we can continue a mutually beneficial trading relationship with the United States, but over the long term, Canada does need to build that infrastructure.
Any further questions in the room? Yes.
Yeah, just a few detailed clarity questions. Just going back to your comments about means tested, I think I understand, but the $15 flat rate, does that mean that it is not based on income at all and that it is just across the board? Can you...
Well, and that is the intent of the program. The intent of the federal program is $10 a day childcare. No means testing, no income testing. We have a different philosophy in Alberta. We typically do means or income test our programs. The federal government very much views this as a universal program. Given the difficulty in access around the country and just the time it takes to create spaces and the financial pressures we're facing, it does seem that means testing would enable the people who really need subsidized childcare to access it more quickly, while people with more means would be able to seek childcare, perhaps absent a government program or without a majority government subsidy.
So that's what you would like to see, but so this update today is going to just be across the board?
Yeah, there's no means testing in $10 a day. And so we are meeting our commitments under the agreement, but under a next term, it's certainly a discussion we'll be having to see if we can tailor the support to those who need it the most.
So it seems like, though, going to a flat rate is kind of the opposite of the average. Like, if there's average, there would be more expensive places where presumably people who have more income would be able to go to those ones. So why that shift to a flat rate?
It's a good question. The challenge is that regardless of where we set the fees, the average has to remain at $15 per day and then $10 as of March 2026. So the only way that we can have some parents pay more is by having some parents pay less, but towards zero. And $0 childcare also has its own consequences. We've heard from parents and providers that people are onboarding on spaces that they do not need because they are so inexpensive or free in some cases. There are thousands of children accessing a service that costs upwards of $18,000 for $0 today. So we feel, and certainly many of the providers and parents that I've met with feel that there should be some cost participation sharing from parents so that the service is valued and utilized appropriately. And again, we don't have the ability to means test very far because it's going to be $10 per day. It has to, all the fees in the province have to average $10 per day.
Any follow-up? Okay, we're moving back to the lines then. Operator, please put through the next caller.
The next question is from Flor Tamko from Radio Canada. Please go ahead.
Yeah, good morning. I would like to know how the government ensuring that childcare operator will make a financial profit.
Thank you for the question. So with the funding changes that we're making on April 1st, including the 2% or greater inflationary increase, the vast majority of childcare providers should continue to be able to provide core childcare and earn some form of profit in most cases.
And one follow-up.
Yeah, maybe I don't know. Maybe I missed the answer or the question. I would just like to know what is the average cost of daycare right now in the province?
Well, the average is $15 per day.
The average, okay, $15 per day. Okay,
yep.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very
much.
much.
Yeah, but to expand on that further, that doesn't mean that parents in the same city are paying the same amount for the same type of childcare and age of child. And that is one of the challenges that we are solving with the move to a flat fee. It's also going to greatly simplify the administration of the agreement, which has been a significant pain point for our providers. We want them to spend less time and money doing paperwork. And frankly, on the government side too, it takes significant resources to manage all of the different streams of funding. This is a much more simplified envelope, flexible funding framework that's going to work a lot better for providers and parents.
Excellent. Any other questions in the room? Yes, please go ahead.
So for the building block, the 53 million grant, tell us what some of the criteria is to be eligible for that type of grant.
Yep, so you've got to be a not-for-profit or public childcare provider, and for the larger capital stream, your project has to be over $500,000, and then you would be eligible for up to a $30,000 grant per space. For smaller retrofits, in other words, if you're not changing your building structure, you're eligible for up to $10,000. But it is a program for not-for-profit and public providers who are creating new childcare spaces.
In terms of public, like what counts as public, if you can?
Municipalities would be considered public. This program is also would be eligible for educational and post-secondary institutions, in addition to, of course, not-for-profits.
All right, that's all the time we have for questions today. Thank you all so much. If you have additional questions or follow-ups, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. My contact information is found at the bottom of the press releases that you had circulated to your emails. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you, everyone.